So, you want to grow your own food, but you're worried about how much time and space it takes and whether you'll be able to grow enough to make all the effort worthwhile. Well, last year I grew 500 kilograms of food in my backyard, and it only took me 4 hours a week on average. So whether you've got anything from a small balcony to a large backyard, in this video series, I'm going to show you how you can grow a 4-hour food garden. This is a high yield, low effort system that produces an abundance of fruit and vegetables. In this video, we're tackling the 7 best crops to get started with for your time, space, and savings at the supermarket. Then in the next video, I'm going to share how to design your garden most effectively using permaculture principles. So make sure you're subscribed. The first crop of our 4-hour food garden is herbs. Herbs are really easy to grow, so they won't take up a lot of your time, which is great considering they can be quite expensive at the supermarket. I don't know about you, but paying $5 for a few sprigs of rosemary feels like a bit of a rip-off. Also, herbs don't take up a lot of space because generally speaking, you only need 1 or 2 of each plant to meet your household's needs. So I think all common herbs can work well, and they're suitable for any size garden, be it a small balcony, a small backyard, or a large backyard. Now, 2 tips to get the most out of growing herbs. Start with the perennial herbs first. These are the plants that won't die at the end of each season, and so you won't have to replant them every year. And once you've mastered these, then you can move on to the annuals, basil, coriander, and dill, which are a little bit more difficult to grow, and they won't give you those continual harvests. My next tip is to understand which plants will tolerate the shade and which plants love the sun. For those that love the sun, give them at least 6 hours of sunlight a day, and for those that tolerate the shade, a little bit of direct sunlight is good too if you can. And a little shout out to parsley here too, which will tolerate full shade, no problems at all. The next crop for our 4-hour food garden is leafy greens, which is another winner for gardens of all sizes. Why are you laughing?
It's giving Steve Irwin.
Check out these leafy greens. Our next crop is leafy greens. Specifically, silver beet, lettuce, kale, and rocket are all great crops. These guys will give you regular harvests over a relatively long period without taking up too much space, so they're great for small gardens. They can be expensive at the supermarket, and often you're forced to buy more than you need, so they go bad in the fridge. Whereas if you grow them at home, you can just pick them as needed, so you save on all that waste and all that fridge space. My pro tips to grow great greens are, firstly, pick a shady spot for them if you live in a warm climate. We've had a really hot summer this year, but this bed has been in shade for the past few weeks, and that's really helped to get this chart established. Tip 2, which is on a related note, is to avoid planting out seedlings in the middle of summer, unless you live in a cold climate and your summers are mild. Otherwise, you'll just end up wasting your time trying to keep them alive when you should have just waited till it cooled down a bit. Now for tip 3, it's down at the lettuce. Tip 3 is to wait until the plants get big enough before you start harvesting. Like this lettuce here is probably only just big enough to start picking. And when you do start picking, make sure you pick the outer leaves first before picking the inside leaves, and don't remove more than 1/3 of the plant at any given time.
What's with the new shirt?
We took a break for lunch and I spilt my lunch all over my other shirt, so I had to have a little outfit change. Our next crop is berries, which are becoming more and more of a feature in my garden. Now, there are obviously a lot of different types of berries, but the 5 that I've chosen, which I think are the best for a 4-hour food garden, are strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, mulberries, and a new favorite for me, Cape gooseberries, which are also called Inca berries or Peruvian ground cherries. The reason why I've chosen these plants is because they're easy to grow and they're perennial, so they won't take up a lot of your time. They're expensive to buy at the supermarket, especially when you buy them organic, and they can produce a lot of nutrient-dense, delicious fruit in a relatively small space. Speaking of small spaces, if you've got a small balcony, consider strawberries. They're great to grow in pots or even a vertical planter. The other 4 are probably more suited to a small or large backyard where you've got a little bit more space. Mulberries are certainly the tallest of the bunch and super fast growing. This tree that you see here I planted only 3 years ago. But blackberries can also get huge and out of control if you're not careful. In fact, in a lot of parts of Australia, they're an invasive species. So let's talk about a few tips to get the most out of our berry crops. The first is to contain them and to prune the suckers. Raspberries and blackberries can spread really easily if you're not careful because they send out new shoots through their roots called suckers. So this is great if you want to fill up a whole bed with just a few plants like I've done here, but it also means that you need to keep an eye on them and dig out any suckers where they pop up where you don't want them. If you can give them their own little space, it'll make containing them easier, and you can even consider putting in a root barrier or a trench around the area. Tip 2 is to understand the life cycle and the fruiting cycle of each plant, because that's going to determine when you're going to prune it and when you're going to replant it. Strawberries, for example, live for quite a few years, but they only fruit for the first 2. So you need to either re-sow them or dig them up and divide them or plant them from runners, or if you're like me, they just pop up randomly in the backyard. What do you reckon? Our next crop for the 4-hour food garden is cucurbits. Cucurbitaceae is the family that includes pumpkin, zucchini, cucumbers, watermelon, gourd, loofah, cantaloupe, and many others. But we want to focus on the first 3. The reason why we want to focus on these is because they're all easy to grow and they can all be grown vertically, so they're all really spatially efficient. Cucumbers and zucchinis will give you abundant harvests all season long, and pumpkins are really good for winter storage. Zucchinis and pumpkins can take up a lot of space, so I wouldn't recommend them for a small balcony garden, but they're definitely suitable for a small or large backyard plot. Cucumbers, on the other hand, can grow well on a balcony from a pot, as long as you've got a nice sunny spot and a trellis for them to grow on. So, 3 quick tips for cucurbits are, firstly, try out different varieties from your local seed company, and then see which grow well in your garden, and most importantly, what you enjoy eating the most. Secondly, have a trellising strategy for your cucurbits before you plant them. You could build a simple frame like I have here, and then tie them up with a string. That's a great way to do zucchinis and cucumbers. Or alternatively, for pumpkins, really what you want is some kind of a steel framed mesh like this one here, so that you can weave the vines through. Moving on to crop number 5, which I'm sure you've been waiting for, nightshades. And more specifically, the 3 best plants for our 4-hour food garden are capsicums, eggplants, and tomatoes. These plants are a favourite in many vegetable gardens, and for good reason. They have the potential to grow a lot of fruit over a long period of time in a relatively small space. And there's a lot of potential for grocery savings because they can be quite expensive to buy. Eggplants and capsicums are often $20 a kilo in our local organic grocer. Fortunately, eggplants and capsicums are pretty easy to grow. Tomatoes, on the other hand, they can be easy to grow if you've got the right climate for them, but they can also be pretty difficult, which I'll discuss in a minute. But first, let's discuss what spaces these nightshades are suitable for. For a small balcony garden, I wouldn't prioritise nightshades because I think you'll get more value out of leafy greens and herbs, which are more spatially efficient. If you have a large balcony garden, you can certainly grow them in pots, but keep in mind that they are heavy feeders, so you will need to fertilise them regularly. If you've got a small or a large backyard plot, then these nightshades will be a perfect addition to your 4-hour food garden. I have a love-hate relationship with tomatoes. They can be quite a difficult thing to grow, but they're so damn delicious. It's a bit of a trade-off, which I'm constantly weighing, to be honest, and I was considering not including them in the 4-hour food garden because they're susceptible to pests and diseases, and they require a lot of pruning and regular maintenance and watering and sometimes fertilizing. If they weren't so damn delicious, I wouldn't grow them.
Controversial. But you do grow them, and you grow quite a lot of them.
I do grow them. I try to grow a lot of them. They're just such a versatile crop in the kitchen. You know, you make passata, you can do sun-dried tomatoes, you can have fresh tomatoes. It's just one, unfortunately, I can't part ways with. So how do we get the most out of our nightshades? Well, firstly, start them early in pots or trays to be able to extend the growing season. And then plant them out once the soil is warm enough, ideally around 20 degrees. Place them in a sunny, fertile spot and put some compost on the bed before you plant them. Because, as I say, nightshades are typically quite heavy feeders. Now, this is a pretty broad category with a lot of different types of plants, and quite a few which probably don't belong in a 4-hour food garden. But there are some really great ones like turnips, beetroots, spring onion, garlic, and leeks. Now, I've chosen these 5 crops for a few reasons. Beetroots, turnips, and spring onions are all really fast growing and they don't take up a lot of space. And garlics and leeks, whilst they're a little more slow growing, they also don't take up much space. And they're all not hard to grow and can be quite expensive at the supermarket. Now, spring onions is probably my favourite out of all of these because it's suitable for any garden. I'd recommend it for a small balcony garden or even a large backyard. Turnips and beetroots are great in a small backyard plot, but garlics and leeks I'd probably reserve only for a large backyard because they can take up bed space for 5 to 7 months before you can harvest anything. My main tip for these plants, except garlic, is to start them in pots or trays. I sow multiple seeds into one cell, and that saves space both in the tray, but also in the garden bed once you plant them out. And the reason why you can do that with these plants is because as they grow, they push each other apart and then they don't crowd each other out. If you want to know more about how I start all my seeds, then check out this video. Our final crop for our 4-hour food garden is fruit trees. Fruit trees are obviously a longer term investment, but they can improve the yield of your garden far more than any other crop can. This year I harvested over 80 kilograms worth of plums and apricots. And yes, some of that was from some larger trees, but look at this little tree here. This year, this plum was absolutely loaded with fruit. And I reckon I harvested over 20 kilograms worth of fruit just from this one tree. And the other part is that it only takes up about that much space on the ground. So it means that you can also grow a whole other crop underneath. Here I've got capsicums. The best 6 fruit trees for your 4-hour food garden are apricot, plum, apple, pear, lemon, and fig. These trees all have cultivars that can grow in a variety of different climates, and they all have the potential to produce an abundance of high-value fruit. Now, fruit trees will certainly do best in the ground, but you can grow some in pots. Lemon is a popular one, for example. But if you've got a small balcony, then I'd prioritize other crops first. If you've got a small or a large backyard though, then these plants will be a great addition. In terms of tips, there's so much that can be discussed about fruit trees because they provide so many benefits beyond just fruit. Following permaculture principles, fruit trees can be used strategically to create microclimates for other crops by breaking the wind and creating partial shade. These are all aspects of the layout and design of your 4-hour food garden that I'll be covering in upcoming videos, so make sure you subscribe. So those are our top 7 crops for your 4-hour food garden. If you're planning on starting a garden, take a screenshot of the summary that suits your space best. And to the more experienced growers, I'd love to know in the comments, what are your favourite low maintenance, cost saving plants to grow?